Hey everybody, Dr. Legrand here, and today we're going to be talking about the supplements that changed my patient's ADHD for good. Over the past 10 years, if you don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Legrand. I specialize working with patients that have ADHD, specifically adults with ADHD, and just over many years, like trial and error, trying lots of different supplementation, but using lab testing to help really narrow this down makes a huge difference. And so I want to know in the chat, let me know if you're like this patient of mine where you're finding that you are having memory issues. Let me know in the chat having memory issues, or you find that you're forgetting places or forgetting things. So this patient, they were about in their mid 50s, and they were starting to lose their keys more frequently. They were starting to lose where when they would drive down the road where they were going, they would just misplace stuff a lot. And so this was a big concern because they definitely had a family history of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, which is very common with people with ADHD. And so when I did some lab testing, one of the big things that I find when this is an issue that really do help with this component of your ADHD is when we see this low, which is serine. So when serine is low, that is a big red flag. That's a concern of why your memory is becoming an issue. And we want to prevent that drastically. Like, we want to nip it in the butt, make sure that we address that. And the best thing that you can use as far as a supplement for that is phosphatidylserine. So generally, obviously it's not going to do anything for you unless you do see that these levels are low, just like with my patient. Once we supplement that, that's when he started to have better memory recall. He wasn't forgetting things all the time, and there wasn't much concern, and also preventing things like dementia and Alzheimer's disease, which can be beneficial when you can find certain deficiencies like serine. Now, let me know in the chat if you are someone that, and this is very common for most people with ADHD, but let me know in the chat, are you struggling the most with motivation, drive, focus issues? Let me know in the chat, because that's probably the most common thing that I do see with patients, but I want to know in the chat, just let me know. So this patient, just like it's pretty common with a lot of my patients to see this, where the drive is not there and you're having issues with focusing throughout the day and you're struggling at work and you're also not as present at home. And so usually we go to thinking it's just dopamine, which in this case, the dopamine levels were low. But one other additional thing that we do need to look out for is what helps feed dopamine, which is tyrosine. So if tyrosine is low, we do want to make sure to test that and see, okay, is that something that can be a culprit to this? And if that's the case, we want to address, of course, both of those. And so the supplement I like using, and the one I use for patients, is Dopa Boost. And the reason for Dopa Boost is because it has N-acetyl-L-tyrosine in it, has vitamin B6, which helps take tyrosine to L-Dopa, and then from L-Dopa to dopamine to help improve also dopamine levels. So you need to make sure that's in there. Also, mucuna purines, which, sorry, I just erased. I can see that. There we go. So mucuna purines, which has L-Dopa in it, which is going to help improve dopamine. Also has green tea extract, which also helps improve dopamine levels as well. So all these things help improve dopamine using something like Dopa Boost. All right. Now, another one to also look out for that I would say about 90+% of people I've tested. So if you're an adult with ADHD and watching this, it's a very high likely chance that this could be an issue. And that is phenylethylamine, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So if that's an issue, we got to make sure to address that. And the best thing to address that is using the amino acid phenylalanine to help improve phenylethylamine levels. Now, why is that important? Because phenylethylamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter that helps things like motivation, focus, and even memory too, and mood. So pretty important. People don't really talk about this when it comes to ADHD, but it's probably the one that I see the most common problem. And if you're watching this, it's probably good chance that you might need to be using something like DL-phenylalanine. Okay. Now, there's a lot of different supplements, and so you could download my ADHD health guide. It's in the description if you haven't already. that goes over a lot of different supplements, different labs to do, stuff like that. You can download that in the description below. Now, another thing to also keep in mind about if you're struggling with focus, motivation. So another patient of mine, I don't see this too often, but it does happen where I will see all different markers low. So in this case, we'll see phenylethylamine levels are low, tyrosine levels are low, dopamine levels are low, norepinephrine and epinephrine. That's a lot. And when those are all low, it's really hard to function throughout the day. And maybe that's you. Maybe you are having a hard time functioning throughout the day, and that could be the case. And so when I see this with my patients, one that I do like using is something known as Dopatone Active. And I don't usually use combo supplements just because there might be one or two ingredients that I don't need. But in this case, when I do see this, it does target everything that I do need. And I'll explain why. So, first off, vitamin B6, and I've talked about that. So, vitamin B6 helps every step of the process of the dopamine pathway. So, we definitely need that. Um, Selenium is really good for thyroid. It does also help a lot with the dopamine pathway. Echinopurines, we talked about that, has L-DOPA in it, has DL-phenylalanine in it, which we do need that, has N-acetyltyrosine, which we do need that because they're low and all of these things, right? And N-acetyl-L-cysteine, beta-phenylalanine, so it does actually have PEA in it, and blueberry extract and alpha lipoic acid, which helps with this whole process. So it helps with norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine. So it covers all your bases. And usually when I see labs like this and we use something like Dopatone Active, within about 2 weeks or so, we start seeing a pretty drastic change just because they were so low and their medication wasn't addressing all these things. It was only maybe addressing just dopamine. That's it. But I was missing everything else that helps feed dopamine, help improve dopamine levels. So we just want to make sure everything is addressed in order to improve motivation, focus, and drive, right? Now, let me know in the chat, maybe you experience feeling more depressed and unfocused. Let me know in the chat if that's the case for you, because this does happen. It's very common to also see depression being an issue with people with ADHD, not everybody, but like my patient here that had those symptoms of depression and were not focused, it's because certain other things that were low. Now, norepinephrine and epinephrine were low, but serotonin levels were low. So if that's the case, then we aren't needing to necessarily be addressing just the dopamine pathway, but we need to be addressing serotonin pathway and making sure that is being addressed. So in that case, if you look at serotonin, there's a few things that we might need to do, which is 5-HTP and tryptophan. So supplementing both of those can make a big difference to improve serotonin levels, like this patient, and L-theanine. So L-theanine is really great for both serotonin and also for the dopamine pathway. So that's why we supplement that. And once we did that, depressive symptoms started to dissipate more. Motivation was improved, focus was improved, happiness, mood improved, just within about a month or so. But it's about first targeting what is deficient first and knowing, because it could be very difficult to try to figure out all these different things that could be off. So that's the thing that's important to kind of address. Now, the next thing is, let me know in the chat, are you someone that feels stressed, anxiety, agitated, or unfocused? Let me know in the chat if that is you. Because if it is, then, there is different things that could be happening in this case if you are feeling like that. Because like this patient, they were on 2 different medications, an antidepressant and also on Adderall. And they were feeling more stressed and agitated. And when we ran their tests, it made a lot of sense of why they were feeling that way. And the reason why they were feeling that way is because, look, dopamine levels were elevated, serotonin levels were elevated, and even their GABA levels were elevated. That's not a good sign. You don't want to be in that situation. The reason being is because when these levels are too high, you're going to have things like these symptoms, more agitated, irritated. It's what we call serotonin syndrome. When serotonin is too high and now you're taking an SSRI, and if you're doing other medication like Adderall, like this patient was, you'll see your dopamine levels being too high. So he could not function. And that's a scary situation to be in. But it's a good thing that we caught it because, and that's the case, then we need to start lowering that down. Obviously, we need to change the dosage a bit. So, working with your providing prescribing doctor, which they did, to help kind of manage the medications better, kind of lowering it. That's usually what we'll do is we'll work with the prescribing doctor to help with that case. But then we need to add some other supportive treatment to bring those things down as well. And some of the best ones is both L-theanine, rhodiola, and usually there's B vitamin issues because it's not being broken down. So sometimes it's just the conversion of taking serotonin, breaking it down into melatonin, or dopamine, breaking it down to norepinephrine and epinephrine. And usually it's because there's certain B vitamins that are deficient that are not breaking it down efficiently and effectively enough. And that's why those levels are also elevated. So we had to address that. And both rhodiola is really great and L-theanine is great for lowering those naturally. Now, you might have been like, well, I thought L-theanine elevated. L-theanine is a great neutralizer. So if it's elevated, it'll help lower it. If it's low, it'll also bring it back to a neutral balance. That's why I like L-theanine because you can use it in both cases. So it's why it's usually my number one recommended because I can use it for both high and low situations with different neurotransmitters. Okay. Now, one other big symptom that is very common, especially if you're an adult with ADHD, which I specialize working with, is if you're exhausted, unfocused, and stressed. Let me know in the chat if you're struggling with that. Or, yeah, you have sleep issues. Someone just mentioned here trouble with sleeping. If that's you, let me know in the chat because this is very common with adults with ADHD. I would say about 92% of the people I have tested have some kind of cortisol issue, just like this patient does. Now, depending on what kind of cortisol issue, sometimes in this case, it might be low in certain spots or high in certain spots, like this patient. Or it could be just low throughout most of the day or low and then all of a sudden spike at night. Depends. So this is why it's good to test for it to see, okay, because treatment is going to be different. But with this patient, in this case, I use two things. One, we need to address the low cortisol in the morning. So taking something known as adrenal desiccated adrenal bovine first thing in the morning to help improve cortisol levels a bit. And then we had to lower the cortisol because they were also feeling, not only exhausted, but also stressed out. So that really impacted their focus a lot. And so this is why I need to use something like Cortisol Manager, which has things like ashwagandha in it and magnolia, which both are known to lower cortisol levels to help you more function better. Now, you got to be careful with ashwagandha. This is why I always say it's best to probably test for it because if you took ashwagandha, let's say here in the afternoon and your levels of cortisol were low, it would actually make things worse. Now, you can see naturally your cortisol should be dropping down. That's because you're supposed to be going to sleep. You want melatonin to kick in. So, usually, if people don't know, I recommend, usually doing ashwagandha just at nighttime if you don't know where your cortisol levels are at. Otherwise, it can make some issues for sure. Can make you feel a little bit more depressed, low energy if your cortisol levels are low to begin with. And now you're adding cortisol at the wrong time. So, those are some really big things that definitely make a big impact for most people when we're trying to understand the root cause first with lab testing. And then with lab testing, then we have a complete roadmap. Then we know exactly what to implement. We know what type of supplements to implement. I don't have to go out completely blind. You don't have to go completely blind. You know exactly what your body needs when you can see labs and know the best supplements that are going to make a big impact on helping with your ADHD, just like with all these patients that I've worked with over the years. And so, if you would like to have those type of same results, like many of my ADHD patients have, I'd love to help you out. Basically, what I'm offering is a time to book an appointment with me. So all you got to do is just click on the link in the description below to purchase and book an appointment with me. It's a 45-minute appointment, so I could dive deeper into your medical situation and understand what kind of labs we need to implement. So that way we can come up with a very effective plan that's going to help with your ADHD symptoms to improve your focus, your motivation, and drive. So all you got to do is click on the link in the description below, and that's where you can purchase that appointment with me. Hope to see you on the other side. Thank you guys so much for attending, and I'll see you guys on the next live stream. Thanks. Bye.